When the city fell, the princess and I were captured together. My husband arrived with his soldiers, holding the rebel leader's wife hostage. "Your wife for mine," the rebel leader agreed. I was filled with hope, only to watch him walk step by step towards the princess. Julian Thorne walked right past me. He was so close I could smell the familiar scent of snow-laden spring on him. It was the incense I always used. After we were married, he had pleaded with me to prepare a box for him too, saying that if he wore the same fragrance as me, it would be as if I were always by his side. Julian was born with charming eyes, and he had gazed at me with such tenderness when he said those words. His look was so sincere, so full of love, it made me believe he truly loved me to the bone. Until this moment. He brushed past my skirt, his gaze never once straying. I let out a desperate, muffled sound. The rebel guard pushed me back. "Don't move!" Julian paused, but he did not turn around. Instead, he strode to the princess, removed the gag from her mouth, cut her ropes with his dagger, and swept her into his arms as she sobbed quietly. I struggled with all my might, even trying to kick him as he passed. Unfortunately, my leg fell short. Julian finally stopped. "Your Highness, I wished to save you as well, but they would only release one person." He turned to look at me, his jet black lashes trembling slightly. "I beg your Highness's forgiveness." If my mouth hadn't been stuffed with a rag, I would have used the sharpest, most scathing words to expose his lie. Alas, I could only watch him turn and leave after he spoke. Julian did not look back again, but Princess Rosalind nestled in his arms, wrapped her arms around his neck, and looked at me over his shoulder. After a moment, she moved her lips. Though no sound came out, I read her words clearly. "Eleanor, this time, I won." I was thrown into a carriage, along with the woman Julian had used to trade for Rosalind. This Lady Audra had a gentle heart. Seeing my frantic struggles, she spoke softly. "It must be uncomfortable with that gag in your mouth. I can take it out for you. But please, promise you won't shout." "All right," I nodded. Lady Audra leaned in and removed the cloth from my mouth. "I am not the princess," I said immediately. She was taken aback. "I am Julian Thorne's wife." Realization dawned on her. So the one he took was... I tilted my head back, forcing back the moisture in my eyes. "The one he took is Princess Rosalind. I am merely a discarded pawn, of no use." Lady Audra didn't entirely believe me, but seeing my deathly pale face, a hint of pity entered her eyes. "I cannot take a lady's word alone. However, in a few days, an old acquaintance of Princess Rosalind is due to arrive in Yong City. If you are truly not the princess, I will ask my husband to grant you more freedom. But until then, you must be patient." Perhaps Lady Audra put in a good word for me. I was locked in a relatively clean room, waiting for Rosalind's acquaintance to identify me. My guard was a girl my age named Kira. She was lively and looked like she could fell an ox with a single punch. She was hostile towards me. I told her I was not Princess Rosalind, but she clapped her hands over her ears after just a few words, shouting, "Don't talk to me! The commander said I am not smart enough, and I'll be tricked by you cunning nobles." Fine. I shut my mouth and quietly awaited the arrival of the old acquaintance. On the morning of the third day, Kira tucked a flower into her hair. She told me shyly, "The young general is coming soon." Just then, frantic footsteps sounded outside. A young man pushed open the door, a gust of wind sweeping in with him, billowing his snow. White robes. He stared at me, his gaze fixed. "Eleanor." I don't know why. A person I hadn't seen in 6 years simply called my name, and the composure I had been clinging to since my capture crumbled completely. I was born into the House of Vance, and my father was one of the 3 highest ministers of the court. At the age of 7, I was chosen by the Empress to be a study companion for Princess Rosalind. For the first 3 years, Rosalind and I were inseparable, our bond very strong. But I don't know when it started. She gradually became hostile towards me. Perhaps it was when the Empress praised my calligraphy for having the air of a master, Or perhaps it was when I could memorize an essay after a single reading while she had to study late into the night. I didn't want to grow distant, so I learned to hide my talents. Only then did she become close to me again. But, while the flair of one's writing can be hidden, feelings of love will spill from the eyes even when one's lips are sealed. Rosalind soon discovered that we had fallen for the same person. The Crown Prince's study companion, Alaric Snow. She broke with me again. Even when I suggested we could compete fairly, Rosalind refused, sneering at me. Have you forgotten? I am a princess. Do you think you are worthy of competing with me? Rosalind went directly to the emperor to ask for a marriage decree. The emperor agreed, but Alaric knelt outside the palace hall for an entire night. He said he already had someone in his heart and begged the emperor to retract his order. The current emperor was not a benevolent man. He looked down on Alaric and said he could either accept the marriage or defy the edict. Defying an imperial edict was a crime punishable by the execution of one's entire clan. I stood under the palace walls with a lantern, waiting for a lost and desolate Alaric. The young man was draped in a black cloak, his face as pale as snow. The first thing he said to me was, "Eleanor, are you cold?" I thought to myself that I didn't need to ask who the person in his heart was. The lantern swayed in the wind. Holding back tears, I pushed the lantern into his hand and smiled. "I am not cold. The snow is heavy, my lord." In the end, Rosalind did not marry him. That year, at the age of 13, Alaric's grandfather, in protest of the emperor's tyranny, struck his head against a pillar in the throne room and died. The emperor was furious. Alaric went from being the capital's most celebrated young man to a prisoner, exiled to the northern lands. I wanted to see him off, but Rosalind locked me in my room. "Through the door," she said coldly. "What I don't want, you are not allowed to pick up." I secretly tried to send him things, but they were brought back to my room by my mother less than an hour later. "Eleanor, forget him," my mother said, holding me, her eyes red. "If the emperor finds out, our family will be implicated as well." After that, I drifted through life until I was 16. The emperor betrothed me to Julian. Marrying one man was the same as marrying any other. I accepted it calmly. On our wedding night, Julian told me he was the one who had asked the emperor for this marriage. He showed me a painting. It was of me on a small red horse, leaning down to strike a ball in a game of polo. He said that, ever since that polo match 3 years ago, he had never been able to forget me. I told him I would be a good wife, and I thanked him for his favor. Julian was not discouraged. He seemed to love me desperately. Besides his official duties, he spent all his time with me. He took me on spring outings, to summer retreats, to see the autumn maples, and to watch the winter snow at our villa. Every morning, he would kiss my forehead and tell me he adored me. When I had trouble sleeping, he would let me lie in the crook of his arm, patting my back gently until I fell asleep. My defenses slowly began to crumble. I tried to reciprocate. Julian noticed. He was overjoyed, holding me for a long time. "Eleanor, do you feel even a sliver of affection for me?" I thought for a long time and finally gave a solemn nod. I thought I should put the past behind me, but from that day on, Julian changed. He came home later and later, his clothes always carrying a strange perfume. Finally, on my birthday, when he still hadn't returned by nightfall, I put on my cloak and went to find him. Julian was on a decorated riverboat, peeling a tangerine for Rosalind. Rosalind disliked the white pith, so he was meticulously picking it out with a pair of tweezers. "It is her birthday today. Aren't you going back to be with her?" Rosalind said with a coquettish smile, snatching a segment from his fingers, her red lips brushing against the same fingers that had caressed my face that morning. "How could she be as important as you?" Julian replied. My breath caught in my throat. Rosalind snorted. "Eleanor Vance is a renowned beauty. Seeing her every day, have you not been moved at all?" Julian's hand, which was pouring tea, paused for a moment. The tea spilled over the cup. He calmly placed the teapot back on the stove and smiled. "Rosalind, you know that, from the very beginning, you were the only one in my heart." Only then did Rosalind smile again, reaching out to touch his face. It is time for Eleanor Vance to know the taste of unrequited love, of being trampled underfoot. So that is how it was. I belatedly felt a sharp pain and looked down to see that my palm was bleeding from where I had dug my nails in. How difficult it must have been for him, putting on an act for 2 years. Before I could present my letter of separation, the rebellion in the north grew fiercer. Julian was ordered to Yong City to oversee the battle. Rosalind insisted on going with him, and she specifically requested my presence. On the day the city fell, I could have escaped. Rosalind had sprained her ankle and tearfully begged me to save her. I had no desire to risk myself for someone like her, but when I heard my name called, I instinctively looked back. In that split second, she lunged and grabbed my ankle, and so we were both captured. The rebels knew Princess Rosalind was in the city, but couldn't tell which of us 2 lavishly dressed women she was. She said it was me, I said it was her. The soldiers lost patience after a moment and gagged us both, until Julian appeared with Lady Audra. He said he wanted to trade Lady Audra for his wife. The rebels agreed, but he took Rosalind without a moment's hesitation. In that instant, I realized my hatred was greater than my pain. Rosalind, Julian, a pair of wretches. Alaric confirmed I was not Princess Rosalind. This is how he introduced me to Lord and Lady Shen. Her name is Eleanor Vance. She is the woman I love. I was taken aback, turning to look at him. The young man was looking at me too, a hint of a smile in his phoenix eyes, as if all the stars in the sky were crushed into his gaze. Lord Shen was blunt. The woman you love? Isn't she that traitor? Julian's words were cut short by a sharp look from his wife. So it was all a misunderstanding, Lady Audra said, taking my hand with a kind smile. Since you are Alaric's friend, you are like a sister to us. I am a few years your senior. May I call you Eleanor? You can call me Sister Audra, I obediently replied. Sister Audra. Good, she said, pleased. You've suffered these past few days. I'll have Kira prepare a bath for you and get you a change of clothes. Tonight, we'll have a welcome feast for you and Alaric. The underlying message was that Kira would still be watching me. Alaric frowned. Sister Audra, I tugged his sleeve. It is fine. I am not familiar with this place. It is better to have Kira with me. Lady Audra paused, patted my hand, and sighed. Eleanor, don't blame me. Our men live on the edge of a knife. I have to be cautious. I understand. Please don't worry. Kira accompanied me to my bath. Ever since she learned I wasn't the princess, she had become much friendlier. The most obvious change was that she now listened to me. Lady Eleanor, did you and the young general know each other from long ago? I stared at the peony tucked in her hair, unsure how to answer. She ladled water over my shoulder. The young general saved my life. He is the most important person to me. I let out a slightly uncomfortable waiting for her to continue. Kira ladled another scoop of water. Since you are the young general's beloved, from now on you are Kira's beloved too. I couldn't help but say, huh? What, huh? Is the water too hot? Lady Audra had prepared a simple, narrow-sleeved tunic for me. I changed, tied up my hair, and followed Kira to the feast. Alaric was already waiting by the door. It was clear he was well-liked. Scholars and soldiers passing by would stop to chat with him. A scholar standing beside him seemed to catch sight of me and said something with a smile. Alaric immediately turned to look at me. Eleanor. The lanterns cast a warm glow, blurring the figures in the courtyard, but the young man's clear, bright features remained unchanged. I felt a momentary daze. It was as if time had turned back. He was not a rebel general, and I was not a wife of the House of Thorn. We were just 2 young people in the capital, mutually in love. But the cuts on my palms from stones and ropes were a constant, stinging reminder. This was not the capital, and I was no longer that naive girl from the House of Vance. Alaric eagerly wanted to walk to me but was held back by his colleagues. He could only meet my gaze as I approached. Alaric, your eyes are glued to Lady Eleanor. The scholar teased with a laugh, exchanged greetings with me, and then made an excuse to leave with the others. Even Kira was pulled away by a female warrior. Beneath the gray wall, only Alaric and I remained. We spoke at almost the same time. I am well, he said, knowing what I wanted to ask, offering a reassuring smile. 6 years ago, I was exiled to the north. There, I met Lord Shen, Sister Audra, and the others. They have all taken good care of me. Alaric spoke lightly, deliberately avoiding our current awkward situation, but Kira had already betrayed him. Liar! You were gravely ill 3 times and broke your legs twice. I fought to keep the sob out of my voice. The day I was married, you were there, weren't you? I had learned from Kira that the year I was married, Alaric had risked death to return to the capital. Lord and Lady Shen had tried to dissuade him, but he had simply said, "My lord, my lady, I have dreamt of seeing her in her wedding gown." Helpless, they let him go. Alaric rode a fast horse back to the capital by night. The Vance estate was heavily guarded, so he waited on the route the wedding carriage would take. The once noble young man, now like a rat in the gutter, hunched over, disguised as an old man with a burned face, hoping only to get closer, just a little closer, to the carriage. Finally, he saw it approaching from the end of the street. Red curtains hung from the sides, a vague figure seated inside. He followed the crowd to the Thorn estate. The carriage stopped before the Vermilion gates, and the bride, her hair like a cloud, was helped down. Alaric seemed to be lost in memory along with me. After a long time, he said softly, "Eleanor, you were beautiful in your wedding dress." Just as I imagined. He gazed at me deeply, his amber eyes trembling like a wind-swept lake. My own vision blurred, so much love, and so much despair. 1,000 words condensed into a single restrained sentence. Alaric, I am so happy to see you again. He was taken aback. Then a soft, gentle smile appeared. As am I. The guests gradually arrived, and Alaric and I took our seats. Lord Shen raised his cup, said a few brief words of welcome, and declared the feast open. This was perhaps the simplest banquet I had ever attended. There were no servers. The food and wine were brought out by boisterous soldiers, and guests often had to pass dishes to one another. But it was also the most relaxed meal I had ever had. The food was hot. We didn't have to kneel formally, and we didn't have to cover our mouths with our sleeves when we drank. After a few rounds of drinks, a soldier suddenly staggered up to me. "Lady Eleanor, a toast to you." Confused, I immediately stood up with my cup. He held his cup high, grinning. Thank you, and all you useless nobles who know nothing of the real world for ruining my family." The soldier's voice was loud. The courtyard fell silent. Alaric immediately pulled me behind him, frowning. "Old Cole, you are drunk!" "I am drunk!" He smashed his cup and pointed at me. "If I weren't drunk, this delicate noble lady wouldn't be standing here. These damn aristocrats killed 13 members of my family. 13. Alaric's expression darkened. "This has nothing to do with her. Nothing to do with her." "Ha, of course. My family's death has nothing to do with her, but she is the wife and daughter of those corrupt officials. An appendage. What she eats, what she wears, which of it doesn't come from them? Which of it isn't squeezed from our blood and sweat?" He roared at me, then broke into sobs. "My little girl was only 3. When she died, she wasn't even as tall as my leg." The soldiers' cries echoed in the courtyard. The already quiet space became deathly still. The anger on Alaric's face dissipated slightly with the man's mournful cries. Lord Shen tried to smooth things over with a laugh. Why bother with a drunkard? Only then did the others react, scrambling to drag the soldier away. Alaric squeezed my hand reassuringly, barely suppressing his anger. He apologized to Lord and Lady Shen and led me away. The night wind was strong. He draped a cloak over my shoulders. We walked slowly down the long street. The lanterns by the roadside swayed in the wind. Old Cole's family, all 13 of them, were driven to their deaths by a tyrannical official. Only his crippled younger brother survived. Alaric was silent for a long time before explaining in a low voice. Although I am angry at his behavior tonight, I cannot bring myself to be too harsh. But rest assured, I will tell Kira to make sure he never appears before you again." I was speechless. For the past 19 years, I had been taught that the House of Vance was a single entity. We prospered and suffered together. We, the women of the house, enjoyed its provisions, and were expected to contribute, even sacrifice, for it. But I had never so clearly realized that I was merely an appendage. The world did not care that I had studied under a literary giant, that I was well-read, that I could blend perfumes, manage affairs, and paint. I was simply a flower adorning the brocade of the House of Vance, my father's house, and the House of Thorn. If my father's or husband's family fell, the flower would naturally fall into the dust. Who would care about the joys and sorrows of a single flower? Alaric thought I was still angry, and was about to say more. I suddenly turned, my gaze burning as I looked at him. Can I be more than just someone's appendage? The next day, I went to see Lady Audra. There was much to be done in the city. Pacifying the people, distributing land, treating the wounded. Alaric rested for half a day before being dragged off by Lord Shen to take inventory of the remaining supplies. Even Kira, in addition to watching over me, had to help with the laundry. I offered to help her. The moment my hand touched the water, Kira was so frightened she ran around the courtyard with the basin. "My lady, you can read and write and do sums. Why are you trying to take my manual labor? Why don't you go help the lady with the accounts?" I couldn't help with the accounts. Lady Audra was still wary of me, but Kira's words gave me an idea. The northern lands were poor, and not many people were literate. Perhaps I could do something to help. Lady Audra listened to my proposal. "Eleanor, old Cole was just drunk and sad. You don't have to take his words to heart." I shook my head. "Sister Audra, before, I was the daughter of a high minister, a lady of the House of Vance. Later, I was the wife of Julian Thorne. But I have never been just Eleanor Vance." I met her gentle gaze, a smile on my lips that did not conform to noble etiquette. "I want to be Eleanor Vance." Lady Audra had me write letters home for the illiterate soldiers. They had been away from the north for a long time, but most of their families were still there. In the past, they had asked the few scholars to write for them, but the scholars were busy and could only squeeze in time late at night. After being seen a few times, no one asked again. I accepted the task. I set up a small table with paper and ink in a corner of the street and waited. Lady Audra had already spread the word, but after half a day, no one came. Alaric rushed over, saying he wanted to write a letter. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes, shook my head, and sent him away. He was already exhausted. I didn't want him to worry about me. Besides, I wanted to be Eleanor Vance, not just Alaric's beloved. I picked up my pen and paper and went out, just in time to see a young soldier peering around a corner. Our eyes met, and he turned to leave. I called out to him. "Excuse me, young sir, do you have family in the north?" Of course he did. The young soldier was very shy. He stood before the table, and Kira had to push him 3 or 4 times before he finally stammered. I want to write to my mother." I dipped my pen in ink. "Please, go on. Mother, I am well. Do not worry." "Leo." I quickly wrote down the words and waited for more. Leo scratched his head. "That is it." I looked at the few words on the paper. "Is there nothing else you want to say?" He shook his head. "If I say too much, the others won't get a chance." I smiled. "It is all right, there is no one else here now. You can say more." "No, everyone wants to write, but..." Leo blushed and glanced at me shyly. "We've never spoken to nobles like you. We don't know if you are easy to get along with, or if you look down on us." Kira crossed her arms. "And now you know?" "I do. I'll go tell everyone." He ran off quickly, returning with a large group of people. Leo stayed to help Kira maintain order. The soldiers lined up, each writing only a few words. The longest was 3 sentences. They all wanted to leave a chance for others. That day, I don't know how many letters I wrote. By the end, my hand could barely hold the pen. But my heart had never felt so full. The soldier's attitude towards me changed from shy and distant to warm and friendly. One brought me a bag of wild fruit, another a jar of pickled plums. A round-faced young man even twisted his shirt hem and said, "Sister Eleanor, I don't have anything to give you. How about I help you with your laundry?" Kira glared at him. "You are trying to take my job." Leo, being more observant, noticed me frequently flexing my wrist and shooed the remaining people away. As Kira was closing the door, she peeked out and then back in. "My lady, that Cole is lurking outside. I'll go chase him away." I shook my head. "If he wants to write a letter, treat him as you would anyone else." He was, after all, a pitiable man. The next day and the day after, I continued to write letters in the small hut. Cole loitered outside every day but never came in. I didn't chase him away, nor did I invite him in. By the 6th day, there were far fewer people needing letters. As the sun was setting, after sending off the last soldier, a furtive figure slipped in, his face mostly hidden by a brown turban. Kira looked up and laughed. "Old Cole, you are quite the master of disguise." Cole looked at me awkwardly, unsure whether to stay or go. I spread out a sheet of paper. "What would you like to write?" He stammered out his message. I wrote it down quickly and gave it to Kira to seal. Cole remained standing there. I looked up at him. "Lady Eleanor." He spoke as if facing his own execution. "I was talking nonsense that day. Please don't take it to heart." He then clasped his hands and bowed deeply. I finally smiled at him. "There is no need for that, sir. My father was an honest and upright man his whole life, but you did not know who my father was. So I will assume you were cursing all corrupt officials, and I will not hold it against you. As for my husband, I can only say that your curses were most gratifying." Hearing this, Cole's expression became even more abashed. "The lady has a generous heart. I am ashamed of myself." "You flatter me, sir." By the time we saw Cole off, the lanterns were being lit. Kira and I walked slowly back to the small courtyard. The city was still filled with the desolation of war, but after half a month of recovery, signs of life were returning. A lame young girl was walking slowly with a short stick. A tall young man walked beside her, clapping his hands dramatically. "You are doing great, Alara. Slow down, I can't keep up." Praised, the girl moved her stick faster, a smile appearing on her face. After 100 steps, she was exhausted and sat on a stone bench to catch her breath. Alaric squatted down in front of her and, like a magician, produced a piece of candied fruit, placing it in her hand. "Alara, can I ask you for a favor?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. Alaric said with a grin, "The young man who usually delivers grain to your family has other duties now. Lord Shen has asked me to take over, but I am very busy. Would you be able to pick up the grain at the end of the street every day and also deliver some to the old man next door?" The girl's eyes widened. But I am a cripple." Alaric waved his hand dismissively. "So what? You walk faster than I do." The girl opened her mouth, and after a long moment, a light shone in her eyes. "All right then." She tugged at her clothes. "I suppose I have to. You are too busy, and the old man is old. It has to be me." Alaric's eyes crinkled in a smile. "Then I am counting on you." He watched the girl walk into a nearby alley before turning and meeting my gaze. The young man was taken aback, a little chagrined. "I had some free time today and wanted to see you, but I got held up. If you had come earlier, I wouldn't have been free either. This is just right." Alaric's lips curved into a smile. "True, Lady Eleanor is quite famous in Yong City now. If I wanted to see you, I'd probably have to wait in line for 2 hours." I retorted with a smile. "But you and I are old acquaintances. I'll waive 1 hour for you," Kira muttered. "And I'll open another back door for the young general, so he can see you right away." We looked at each other and laughed. Alaric took us to the only wonton stall in the street. 3 steaming bowls of vegetable wontons, with thin skins and generous fillings. I broke into a light sweat as I ate. Alaric handed me a handkerchief. I took it and saw a cluster of autumn begonias clumsily embroidered on it. Did Kira embroider this? I couldn't imagine anyone else with such crude needlework. Alaric coughed. I did. I was surprised. I managed to say, "It is nicely done." Alaric looked at me for a long time. I kept it safe. Later, it was lost. So I tried to embroider one myself. I looked down, stunned. The stitching was crude, but upon closer inspection, the design of the begonias was clearly in my style. He must have looked at that handkerchief over and over again to remember even the extra strokes I liked to add to the leaf veins. Somewhere deep inside, a dull ache started. Alaric. I had just said his name when the city gates suddenly boomed with the sound of war drums, and signal fires blazed. They're attacking! The Imperial Army is attacking. Kira grabbed my hand and ran. You have to live! I'll embroider you another one. No, 100 handkerchiefs. The young man squeezed my hand tightly, his eyes bright. All right, it is a promise. Kira, having followed the army for years, was worried but not panicked. She led me back to the small courtyard, bolted the gate, and pulled out a large chopping knife from behind the water vat, sitting in the courtyard with the knife in hand. My lady, go back inside, lock the door, and hide under the bed. I didn't want to be a burden. But I didn't want to leave her alone either. Kira urged. Go on. You'll only distract me if you are here. Then be careful. I turned to go, but after a few steps, I heard Kira shout, Who is there? I turned back to see 2 men in black disarm her with a single blow. Kira dodged one sword, but another was about to strike her chest. Kira! I was terrified. With a strength I didn't know I had, I threw myself on top of her. The man with the sword's expression changed. He quickly flipped his wrist, and the blade flew past my cheek, cutting a few strands of hair. Our eyes met, and I felt as if I had fallen into an icy abyss. Julian. Eleanor. He bent down and pulled me up, gently brushing the stray hairs from my face. I am late. I instinctively pushed him away. Julian's face darkened, and he gripped my shoulders firmly. Eleanor, listen to me. I know you resent me, but I had no choice. Rosalind is a princess. If I had left her here, the Emperor would have surely punished me. So, it doesn't matter if I am left here. I sneered. Besides, you only ever had eyes for Rosalind. You were just acting with me, Julian. On my birthday, I heard everything you two said on the riverboat. It is not like that. Julian frantically wiped the tears from my face. At first, it is true, I asked the Emperor to marry you because of Rosalind. But after 2 years of being with you, you weren't the only one who fell in love. In the days you've been gone, I haven't been able to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I can see you by my side. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. The familiar cold scent enveloped me. I regret it. Only you are my heart's desire. My response was a dagger plunged into his lower abdomen. Julian loosened his grip, stunned. You are trying to kill me? I wish I could kill both you and Rosalind. I turned, gripping the dagger with both hands, wanting to twist it to make sure he died, but his guards pushed me away. My lady. Seeing me fall, Kira struggled violently but was knocked unconscious by a blow to the neck. You are trying to kill me, Julian repeated in disbelief. You are my wife. How could you try to kill me? I looked up at the 7 or 8 men in black surrounding me. I knew I couldn't kill him today, nor could I escape, so I sneered. Yes, if you don't believe me, come closer and I'll give you another one. He staggered back. His men quickly supported him. My lord, we must not stay here. He closed his eyes. Take the lady with us. I'll go with you. Don't touch her, I said, pointing at Kira. Julian waved his hand, and the men around Kira retreated. Julian, if you insist on taking me back, you had better watch your back at all times. Don't even close your eyes when you sleep. He seemed not to hear me, his hand trembling as he touched my face. Eleanor, I will make it up to you. We can go back to how we were as if nothing ever happened. I will make you fall in love with me again. I was taken back to Zhongcheng by Julian. He was temporarily staying in the city lord's mansion. The moment I entered, Rosalind blocked my path. She looked me up and down, a hint of disappointment in her eyes. You actually came back. I ignored her and walked straight inside. Rosalind grabbed my arm. The princess is speaking to you. Are you deaf? Kira had taught me some street fighting moves. She said they were useless against trained fighters, but could be surprisingly effective against ordinary people. So I grabbed Rosalind's fingers and bent them backward. She cried out in pain and let go. Eleanor Vance, how dare you? She stamped her foot, her eyes filled with tears of pain. Are you all dead? You are just going to watch her attack the princess. Her guards were all from the House of Thorn and dared not lay a hand on me, their young mistress. Only her own palace maids rushed forward, but they were stopped by Julian's shout. Rosalind looked at him in disbelief. You are injured? Julian pushed away the guard supporting him and walked to me. My wife was rude and offended the princess. I beg the princess's forgiveness. Rosalind's eyes widened. What? What did you say? My wife was rude. I beg the princess's forgiveness. Rosalind pointed at me, her expression fierce. Your wife. You call her your wife, Julian. Are you insane? Have you forgotten? Your Highness. Julian's voice was cold. Be careful what you say. Rosalind was stunned. Fine, Julian Thorn. You won't regret this. She shot me a cold look and turned to leave. Julian turned back, as if to say something to me, but I had already walked away in the other direction. I locked myself in my room. A maid told me the siege was over. The army had failed to take Yong City. He wasn't surprised. It was only a feint. Alaric must have realized I was gone. But I didn't want him to take any risks. Julian, for now, didn't seem like he would harm me. But as for those 100 handkerchiefs, I didn't know when I would be able to give them to him. What I didn't expect was Julian's extreme caution. Under the pretext of being injured and escorting the princess, he sent both me and Rosalind back to the capital. On the way, Rosalind tried to cause trouble for me twice more. But she soon learned that I no longer engaged in verbal spars but resorted to physical violence. She was too proud to stoop to brawling with me, and if she ordered her maids to attack, Julian's guards would protect me, so she couldn't gain any advantage. After being beaten twice, Rosalind learned her lesson and stopped bothering me. I peacefully embroidered handkerchiefs in the carriage. This one with autumn begonias, that one with white magnolias. Julian rode in the same carriage, but whatever he said, I acted as if I couldn't hear. When he tried to hold me, I would push him away, aiming for his wound. The unhealed injury reopened several times. Rosalind couldn't stand it and told him to ride in her carriage, but Julian politely refused. It would be improper for me to ride with the princess. Rosalind was trembling with anger. She glanced at me and suddenly tried to snatch the half-finished handkerchief from my hand. Eleanor Vance, do you think I am a joke? Are you laughing at me in your heart? I pricked her palm with the needle. Ah, you Eleanor Vance. I'll kill you. Rosalind screamed and lunged at me but was stopped by Julian. I took the opportunity to stab her flailing arms a few more times. Julian Thorn, how dare you treat the princess this way? Unable to hit me, Rosalind slapped Julian across the face in a rage. When I return, I will tell my father, the Emperor, to have you all executed. I snorted and lowered the curtain. The Emperor was currently obsessed with alchemy, and paid no attention to state affairs. Almost everything was handled by the 3 high ministers. My father, Grand Protector Gao, and Julian's great-uncle, Prime Minister Thorn. Not to mention the Empress had no favor, and the currently ascendant imperial consort loathed Rosalind. She couldn't even get a word in edgewise. The Emperor would have to be mad to kill 2 of his most important ministers for her. By the time I had embroidered the 8th handkerchief, we had arrived at the capital. The first thing Julian did was not to report to the palace but to take me back to the Thorn estate. It wasn't until I was sitting in my room that he finally seemed to relax. Eleanor, we have a long life ahead of us. He knelt before me. I can wait, for the day you love me again. I just held my pen, sketching on a piece of paper. What pattern should I do for the next handkerchief? My days at the Thorne estate were not pleasant. It was a place I had lived in for 2 years, but I had never realized how large and lifeless it was. When I wandered the gardens, the meticulously cared for flowers in the pots seemed less vibrant than the wildflowers in the small courtyard. At meals, picking through the dazzling array of delicacies, I found myself craving a bowl of hot vegetable wontons. Not to mention that every time I woke from a dream, I wondered if my time in Yong City had been just that. A dream. Did I really see Alaric again? But the crudely embroidered begonia handkerchief under my pillow told me it was all real. I had to keep waiting to be reunited with him. I inevitably grew thinner. The Imperial Army was suffering defeat after defeat against the rebels. Julian was overwhelmed with work but still sent a stream of precious tonics to my courtyard. I threw them out without a second glance. When he brought them himself, he couldn't even get through the door. Gossip spread through the estate, and even his mother couldn't stand it anymore. Lady Thorne summoned me. Eleanor, I don't know what has happened between you and Julian, but he is your husband. You must know when to stop. Don't let this damage your relationship beyond repair. She chided me from her high horse. After all, Julian seemed to love me very much, even more than before, but leaving aside the fact that he had deceived me, just having been so cherished by someone like Alaric, how could I possibly care for Julian's love, which was lighter than grass? Lady Thorne, I said with a smile, I have a suggestion. Why don't you make the decision and let Julian and me separate? The teacup in her hand crashed to the floor. I looked at her contorted face and graciously offered a concession. If that is too much, you can just divorce me. Julian returned half an hour earlier than usual. I was a little disappointed. A little later, and Lady Thorne might have actually divorced me. Julian ignored his mother and dragged me back to my room, holding me tightly. Eleanor Vance, don't even think about leaving me, not even in death, he said, practically through clenched teeth. I guessed he had been provoked elsewhere, but I didn't care. It was only when he became more aggressive, trying to bite my lips, that I used all my strength to push him away. If you touch me, I will bite my tongue and kill myself. Julian's face went pale. Eleanor, do you hate me that much? I glanced at him, turned, went back into my room, and bolted the door. Although I didn't want to know what had made Julian lose control, I soon found out from my mother, who had rushed over. My child, my mother said, gripping my shoulders. There are wild rumors in the capital that when you were in Yong City you were, by the rebels. It was obvious who had spread the rumor. I felt a pang of pity. It is true. My mother's face went white, her voice trembled. Then you. I shook my head. Mother. No. But does it matter? The important thing is that I was captured. The world will not bother to find out if I was violated. They will only assume I was. My mother's lips moved, but she couldn't say a word in rebuttal. How could she not understand? It was just that it concerned me, and she didn't want to believe it. Mother, I want to separate from Julian. My mother grabbed my hand. Did he say he is disgusted with you? That doesn't matter either, Mother. I squeezed her cold hands. The House of Thorne will not want a matron with a stained reputation. My mother was silent for a long time before nodding through her tears. I felt a little uneasy. If Rosalind hadn't spread this rumor, I wouldn't have wanted to leave Julian in a way that would damage the reputation of the House of Vance. I could disregard my own reputation, but my sisters and unmarried cousins in the clan cared. My mother took me to the main hall. Lady Thorne was very displeased with me. After hearing the rumors, she had taken to her bed. When she saw my mother, she closed her eyes and said nothing. It wasn't until she heard my mother's intentions that she finally opened her eyes, her brow slightly relaxed. The House of Vance has been honorable for generations, yet it has produced such a daughter, she said coldly. Although we are both open-minded families, for such an unfilial and disobedient person, I would advise you to end her life with a silken cord to preserve the honor of the Vance women. My mother had felt guilty towards Lady Thorne. Even with her rudeness, she hadn't minded. But upon hearing this, My mother's expression changed instantly. Lady Thorne, watch your words. My family's affairs are no concern of yours. Lady Thorne snorted. In that case, take the divorce papers and leave. No. Two voices sounded at the same time. It was my mother and a hurried Julian. Me mother said, "How can it be divorce papers?" Julian said, "I do not agree to a separation." Lady Thorne was so angry her face went white. "You rebellious son! How can such an unchaste woman be a wife in my house?" Julian tried to take my hand, but I avoided him. He looked at me, then knelt on the floor. "If Eleanor is not fit to be a wife of the House of Thorne, then expel me from the clan. She will just be my wife." Lady Thorne was so angry she almost fainted. You are trying to kill me. What kind of love potion has this Eleanor Vance given you, to make you defy your parents for her?" Julian lowered his head. "Your son is unfilial." My mother's expression softened. "Julian, don't speak to your mother like that, since you have no intention of separating from Eleanor." Before she could finish, a high-pitched female voice came from outside. "That is not up to him." Rosalind swept in, surrounded by her maids. She was adorned with jewels and silks, holding a red decree, her air arrogant. "The Emperor has already issued a decree, ordering Julian Thorne and Eleanor Vance to separate, and bestowing upon Julian Thorne the honor of marrying Princess Rosalind as prince consort." The words fell, and everyone except me looked at each other in shock. My mother instinctively squeezed my hand, her face pale, a flash of anger in her eyes. Lady Thorne's lips had curved into a slight smile when she heard the Emperor had ordered our separation. But the smile vanished when she heard Julian was to marry the princess. Although it was not forbidden for a prince consort to hold office in this dynasty, Rosalind was arrogant, and the Empress was out of favor. Such a princess was not the daughter-in-law she wanted. Not to mention the rumors that Princess Rosalind, though unmarried, kept several lovers in her residence. But the one who reacted most strongly was Julian. He stared at Rosalind, his eyes filled with undisguised, seething hatred. But Rosalind didn't notice. She strolled over to me, her voice sweet and smiling. "You see, Eleanor, I am a princess. What I want, I can get with ease," she said, word by word. "Alaric was like that, and Julian is too. You will never be able to compete with me." Hearing this, my mother's lips trembled with anger. I squeezed her hand reassuringly and glanced at Lady Thorne. Yes, after all, the princess is Julian's beloved. When the princess and I were captured together, Julian came to rescue us and saved the princess without hesitation. I drew out the word captured. Rosalind's expression changed slightly. "How am I the same as you? I was only captured for half a day." The moment the words left her mouth, she realized her mistake. Lady Thorne's face was as dark as a storm cloud. To send away one unchaste daughter-in-law only to receive another. The House of Thorne would become the laughingstock of the entire capital. But what did that have to do with me? When my mother took me to leave, Julian knelt before her, begging her to let us say goodbye. "I cannot accept such a grand gesture, my lord," my mother said coldly. Ever since she learned Julian had abandoned me to the rebels, she had lost all respect for him. But she still looked at me. I nodded, because in that instant, a malicious thought had come to my mind. "My lord," I said, standing under the eaves with Julian. I smiled at him. "The princess has torn us apart. Are you still going to be respectful to her?" Julian stared at me. How could he not see my intentions? See that I was using him, just as Rosalind had used him to trample on my heart. Julian was silent for a long time before giving a bitter smile. "Eleanor, as you wish." "Farewell, my lord." I lifted my skirt and ran to my mother's side. She lovingly took my hand, and we walked out of the Thorne estate side by side. The autumn sun shone on me, and I did not look back once. How wonderful. I was no longer his wife. I was apprehensive on the way home. Unlike my mother, who only thought of my well-being, my father, as the head of the House of Vance, was a man of strict principles, and might not accept such a rebellious daughter. When I entered the main hall, My father's face was indeed full of worry. My heart pounded as I curtsied. My father looked up at me, his expression softening slightly. Now that you are back, rest well at home for a while. Do not be afraid. Your father is here for you. When the talk dies down, I will arrange another match for you. I will not let you be wronged. I asked tentatively, Father, you mean? A lady of the House of Vance, even in a second marriage, deserves a noble house. My father stroked his beard, his eyes clouding with worry again. But the rebels are advancing relentlessly. They have already taken Huai City. I have repeatedly advised His Majesty to summon the garrisons from the various prefectures to defend the capital, but Grand Protector Gao has always opposed it. If this continues, the capital is in grave danger. A thought stirred in me. Even I, a woman of the inner chambers, knew that the current emperor was not a wise ruler. Under his tyranny, chaos and corruption reigned. The people were displaced and starving. On my journey north, I had seen a land of devastation, completely different from the prosperous capital. It was a misery unimaginable to those who had always lived in the capital. The people desperately longed for a new government. This was likely why the rebel army was so successful. I dismissed the servants and said in a low voice, Father, His Majesty is not a benevolent ruler. Insolence. I had barely begun when my father smashed his teacup at my feet. How can you have such treasonous thoughts? The House of Vance has fought alongside the founding emperor and served every ruler for 300 years. Have you forgotten the loyalty and patriotism I taught you? I slowly knelt. Father, you taught me loyalty and patriotism. But you also taught me that the people are more important than the ruler. When a ruler is tyrannical, it is the common people who suffer. Did our ancestors not fight alongside the founding emperor to overthrow the tyranny of the previous dynasty and restore peace to the land? My father, enraged, raised his hand and struck me across the face. My mother quickly shielded me. My lord, how could you strike her? My father stared at his hand, a hint of regret in his eyes, but he still pointed at me sternly. Look at what she has become. If I do not discipline her, will she not rebel against heaven itself? How can the House of Vance have such an unfilial and disloyal person? He then shouted, Servants? Several strong servants entered. Lock the lady in the ancestral hall. No one is to let her out without my permission. I closed my eyes. I had known all along that nothing I said could move the mountain of loyalty and filial piety in my father's heart, let alone the matter of Alaric and me. My father would only think I had gone mad. I bowed, my forehead touching the ground. There is no need, Father. I have no intention of remarrying. I wish to go to the Great Compassion Convent to practice cultivation. I ask for your permission. On the way to the convent, my mother was constantly wiping away tears. She didn't understand why I had suddenly become so stubborn, unwilling to yield to my father. But she didn't blame me. She just touched my face and said, Don't be afraid, Mother will come to see you often. If you need anything, just send word, and I'll bring it to you right away. As for your father, I'll talk to him. If you don't want to marry, then don't. Not just the House of Vance, my dowry alone is enough to support several of you. With that, 2 streams of tears rolled down her cheeks, and she finally pulled me into her arms. My child, I will become a vegetarian and pray for your peace and happiness. I nestled in her arms, feeling an immense sense of security. Being your daughter is my greatest blessing. Life at the convent was austere, but that was for the old me now. I only felt a sense of exhilaration at having finally escaped my cage. After much persuasion, my mother left only 2 of the 8 maids she had brought. I didn't want them to be forced into a vegetarian diet with me, so I sent them to the eateries outside the convent for their meals every day. The maids, freed from the stuffy courtyard, were as cheerful as a pair of birds, chattering and sharing news from the outside world. Julian had married the princess, after all. But a few days before the wedding, Lady Thorne had placed 2 serving maids in his room. She had tried this before, but Julian had sent them back before they even reached me. This time, however, Julian accepted them. This was a clear slap in the face to Rosalind. Not to be outdone, she stormed into the Thorn estate, dragged the two poor women out, stripped them naked, and tied them behind a horse to be dragged through the streets. Julian did not get angry. He sent them to be treated at a clinic, and at the same time sent Lady Thorn into the palace. Lady Thorn cried for a long time in the imperial consort's chambers, and returned with two beautiful palace maids, along with a verbal edict from the consort, reprimanding Rosalind for being a jealous and unruly princess, unfit to be a model for the women of the realm. Rosalind, being the Empress's legitimate daughter, had never been so humiliated. She immediately stormed into the consort's palace and started smashing things. The maid's gossip ended there. The rest of the story, my mother told me herself. It turned out the consort had a new alchemical formula, and had painstakingly refined it into a spiritual elixir to present to the emperor. Rosalind's rampage had shattered the one and only elixir. The consort knelt on the floor, weeping. The princess has always disliked me. I dare not say a word, but this elixir, one of the ingredients was... She choked, unable to continue. It was her lady, in waiting, who couldn't bear it any longer. She knelt beside the consort, kowtowing desperately, and then rolled up the consort's sleeve to reveal a blood-soaked silk bandage wrapped around her arm. Your Majesty, please see. This elixir required the flesh and blood of a person who had prayed and burned incense for 49 days. The consort prayed in the hall for 2 whole months before she could cut her own flesh to refine the elixir for your Majesty. The consort swayed. My own flesh is nothing, but delaying your Majesty's consumption of the elixir. What should I do? The emperor was furious. He immediately stripped Rosalind of her title, demoting her to a commoner. He also punished the empress with 6 months of confinement for her failure to discipline her daughter, and gave the consort authority over the 6 palaces. Although Rosalind lost her title, the emperor did not retract the decree for her marriage to Julian, so she still married into the Thorn estate. But what awaited a new bride who was already disliked by her mother-in-law, and had lost the emperor's favor? My mother hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. My child, last month, when you asked me to invite Lady Dew to the convent, were you already planning this? Lady Dew was the consort's mother. I used her to draw the consort into my plan. The consort wanted the position of empress. I wanted Rosalind to reap what she had sown. Mother, do you think I am cruel? My mother shook her head, stroking my hair. I only feel heartbroken that my precious child has suffered so much to have to plot so carefully. In my 3rd month at the convent, the maids returned from outside, their smiles gradually fading. My lady, I hear the rebels have taken Yuan City. After Yuan City is the capital. My lady, do you think the rebels will really break through the capital's defenses? Unlike the maids' worried faces, a long-forgotten string in my heart was gently plucked. Alaric, I hardly dared to think his name. I could only embroider handkerchiefs, one after another. I had already finished 98. He had promised me he would live to see me again. I had promised him I would embroider him 100 handkerchiefs. Neither of us could break our promise. I picked up my needle again. Just then, a maid sighed. I heard people are starving to death in the capital. It can't be helped, another maid said sadly. Since the rebels crossed the river, the city has been sealed. No grain can get in, and the price of what is left has skyrocketed. How many people can afford it? Not to mention, it is so cold this year. I put down my needle and thread. How much rice do we have left from the Vance estate? Half a stone, the maid answered, then looked at me in alarm. My lady, you are not thinking of. The common people had no grain left. But which of the noble families in the capital didn't have enough to last 3 years? Especially when the rebels first took a city before the common people even got the news. The nobility had already been hoarding grain, nearly emptying the granaries of several nearby cities. Even the Vance and Thorn estates were no exception. The joy the people felt when they sold their grain then was likely matched by their regret now. If I had never seen suffering, perhaps I could have stood by and done nothing. But I had. The devastated Cole, Leo who had watched his father beaten to death, the lame Alara. There were so many suffering people in the world. I couldn't save them all. so I would save the ones I could. Clara, go and ask the abbess to come. I have something to discuss with her. I instructed the two maids. Pippa, go and ask the strong servants my mother left to help. Leave 3 days' worth of rice in the granary and bring out the rest. The abbess came quickly. After hearing my plan, her eyes showed a look of shock. She bowed deeply to me. Lady Eleanor, your righteousness is admirable. But there are thousands of starving people in the city. Even if you give everything you have, it will only be a temporary solution. I held her arms. Do not worry, abbess. For now, just take the rice I have and cook it into porridge to be distributed to the starving in the name of the convent. I will find a way to get more. With that, I put on my plain white cloak and went out. Clara ran after me, lifting her skirts. My lady, where are you going? I pushed open the convent gate and smiled. To ask for alms. Outside the gate, I met my first charitable donor. Julian stood there, covered in frost and snow, having waited for who knows how long. This was not his first visit. Clara and the others had seen him several times, and had remarked to me what a rare, devoted man he was. But I wouldn't even let him have the satisfaction of a verbal exchange. I told them the whole story of what had happened between us, and I never heard his name from their lips again. Eleanor. Julian rushed towards me, a hint of joy on his pale face. You finally agreed to see me. I gave him a gentle smile. The light in his eyes grew brighter. Lord Thorne, I said. The Great Compassion Convent will be setting up a porridge kitchen in the city to help the disaster victims. I was wondering if you would be willing to donate some grain. Julian was taken aback. Is that all you wanted to say to me? My smile did not falter. Why, is that all? This is a matter of great merit. What do you say, my lord? The light in his eyes dimmed. You know I would not refuse you. I curtsied slightly. Your generosity is appreciated, my lord. A carriage was already waiting. I rode back to the Vance estate. Me mother listened to my intentions. Eleanor, of course. I have no objection to you providing porridge. But how much can you help them? There are countless starving people in the city. Even if we empty the Vance granaries, it won't last through the winter. I looked out the window. Dark clouds hung low, and winter snow covered the deep courtyards. But there was always a glimmer of light on the horizon that could not be hidden. Mother, I only need 2 stones of rice. I smiled and turned back. I will ask for the rest from other families. I am doing a good deed openly and honestly. I have nothing to be ashamed of. Besides, spring will always come. My mother's face was still full of worry. A low voice came from outside. Give her 5 stones. I was startled. Father. A glimpse of a purple robe flashed by, and my father's figure disappeared down the corridor. From the Vance estate, I went to the neighboring Song family. Although they lived next door, we were not close. But after hearing my intentions, Mrs. Song's expression softened considerably. You are quite different from your father. The Song family donated 2 stones of rice. Next was the Sunday family, the Wang family. I went from house to house. They had probably never seen such a shameless noble lady. They looked at me with various expressions, but most donated some grain. After all, the famine was just beginning. I could still rely on the reputation of the House of Vance to get some donations. There were also those who tried to throw me out after hearing my purpose. I was not angry, I said with a smile. My lady, you have never known hunger, have you? You do not know what people are capable of when they are starving? If one day these people are driven to desperation, will they not remember that it was you who bought all their stored grain from them? The lady's face changed. They sold their grain. I paid for it. It was a fair transaction. It is not my fault. My lady, you are mistaken. If they had known about the rebellion in the north as early as you did, would they have sold their grain to you? Lady Eleanor, you have a sharp tongue. Forgive me, my lady. I am only trying to seek a way for them to survive. If the city truly falls into chaos, how can your estate remain unscathed? In the end, I managed to get 1 stone of rice. For 3 days, I went back and forth between the mansions of the city's elite. By the time I returned to the convent, It was late at night. Pippa had stayed behind to count the rice, her face flushed with excitement. "My lady, we have collected 70 stones of rice." It filled 3 whole storerooms. I ran my hand through the yellow and white grains and let out a soft breath. If it were all cooked into porridge, it should last for a month. As for what would happen after a month, I wrapped my cloak tighter and looked out towards the city walls. "Alaric, I want to see you." Half a month later, the rebel army finally reached the city walls. The fragile peace that had been maintained in the capital shattered in an instant. The shadow of the city's fall hung over everyone's head. Even the emperor no longer lingered in his alchemy chambers, but urgently summoned his high ministers to discuss how to flee south. My mother came to me in a hurry, telling me to pack my things and go with them. I shook my head and refused. "Eleanor." My mother was flushed with anxiety. "Are you still going to be angry with your father at a time like this?" "Mother, I am not angry with him. You don't have to worry about me. I have an old friend in the rebel army. They will not harm me." My mother was stunned. An old friend from the north. Could it be? I unfolded the last handkerchief. It was embroidered with a pair of mandarin ducks. "Mother, I have seen Alaric." Hearing his name, my mother knew she couldn't persuade me. No one knew better than her how I had lived through the 3 years of his exile. In a daze, like a walking corpse. For the first 6 months, I was mostly bedridden. If it weren't for my mother crying before me every day, I might not have survived that winter. So it was him. Only he could make you so entranced. My mother was silent for a moment. "But war is dangerous. What if he..." I smiled. "Then I will live on." The wife of the rebel leader is a woman of great ambition. She once told me her biggest regret was not having had a proper education. If they succeed, she will open a school for women. Then, I will be the dean. I will live on, no matter who I lose. I will always miss him. And then, with his memory, I will be myself. "Eleanor, you've grown up." My mother left. My father would surely flee south with the emperor. Although my mother was worried about me, she was more worried about my father. I kowtowed in the direction she had gone. "I hope we will see each other again." The night the city fell, the capital was in utter chaos. The abbess, with a calm expression, gathered us all in the main hall and began to chant softly. Suddenly, the sound of chaotic footsteps came from outside the gate. "The Great Compassion Convent serves the emperor. They have countless treasures," Simone shouted. "Follow me. We'll storm in, take their valuables, and flee south." The abbess remained unmoved, her low voice comforting the panicked nuns. "With sincere offerings to the scriptures, we pray that all living beings may hear the true Dharma and not fall into false views." Clara and Pippa were trembling with fear but still stood in front of me protectively. I pushed them aside, drew the short dagger from my sleeve, and walked into the courtyard, listening intently. The shouts outside were like waves, but they were suddenly drowned out by an even louder sound. "The Great Compassion Convent saved us from our suffering. Everyone follow me to protect the venerable nuns. Protect the Great Compassion Convent." Many voices echoed in response. The sound of footsteps came from all directions, quickly overwhelming the looters' shouts. "Venerable nuns, do not be afraid," Samoan shouted from outside the gate. "We have received the convent's kindness and will swear to protect you all." My eyes welled up. The seeds of kindness I had sown had finally borne fruit. "Thank you." As dawn broke, the outside of the convent fell silent. Summono knocked on the door. "The looters have been driven away. You can all rest assured." The abbess ordered a young nun to open the door and offer thanks. The person outside said again, "Venerable nun, do not open the door. It is not safe." My heart trembled. I rushed forward. "May I ask, has the rebel army entered the city?" "They have." I instinctively clutched the ring on my finger, wanting to ask more. But the person suddenly said in a panic, "Oh no, soldiers are coming." The sound of horse hooves grew louder. Summoning reined in their horse outside the gate. their voice trembling slightly. "May I ask, is there a Lady Eleanor here?" I felt as if I were walking on clouds. My hand was on the door ring, but I couldn't seem to find the strength to pull it. The person outside asked again. "May I ask, is there a Lady Eleanor here? My name is Alaric. I am an old friend of Lady Eleanor's." I threw the door open. The snow and wind were subsiding. A young man in white armor sat on a white horse, as radiant as the morning sun. Our eyes met, and I don't know who was the first to tear up. He held out his hand to me. "Lady Eleanor, I've come to collect those 100 handkerchiefs." I later learned that the House of Thorn had played a crucial role in the rebel army's entry into the city. Prime Minister Thorn and my father were both pillars of the old dynasty, but they chose different paths. Even though my father knew the cause was lost, he still chose to flee south with the last emperor. Lord Shen, however, had long been prepared. He set up an ambush at Wrong Mountain and killed the terrified emperor. My father threw himself on the emperor's body. Lord Shen had heard of my father's reputation for integrity. He treated him with great respect, calling him teacher, and asking him in the name of a student to continue serving the new dynasty to bring about a prosperous and enlightened age. My father turned and looked at him for a long time. Finally, he took out a thin book from his robes. It was the treatise on governance he had painstakingly written. A loyal minister does not serve two masters. When the ruler dies, the minister dies with him. With that, the poison he had already taken took effect, and he died, bleeding from the mouth. My mother followed soon after, taking her own life in the carriage. Lord Shen bowed 3 times to my father's body, and ordered that he and my mother be buried with the honors of a national scholar. After the dust settled, Alaric accompanied me to pay my respects to my parents. "Eleanor," he said, looking at my red eyes, his expression dark, "Lord Shen wanted to save your parents, but your father had already taken poison and your mother." Torn between the woman he loved and his rightful ruler, he had been helpless. I shook my head slightly. I do not blame anyone. It was my father's and mother's choice. Perhaps in that final moment, my father felt a sense torn between his ruler and his people. Abandoning either would have caused him immense pain. As for my mother, she married my father at 16, and had only me, her only daughter. Yet my father, despite the pressure from the House of Vance, never took a concubine or a mistress, fulfilling his promise to be with her and her alone. "I wish to be the southwest wind to fly forever into your arms." As if to confirm my words, a gentle breeze blew by, sweeping the dust from the tombstone. "I kowtowed deeply, Father. I will carry on your legacy and protect the peace and prosperity of the world. Mother, I will take care of myself and live a good life, seeking peace and happiness for myself. Let's go." As we were about to enter the city, a disheveled figure with a dagger rushed towards me. Alaric reacted instantly, kicking him away. The figure flew back several steps before hitting the ground hard. "Eleanor Vance! Eleanor Vance!" A hoarse female voice came from under the tangled hair. She looked up, her face scarred and twisted like a demon's. She shrieked, "I am going to kill you!" I hesitated. Rosalind? Because of Prime Minister Thorn's defection, the House of Thorn was largely spared in the turmoil, except for Julian and his wife, Rosalind. On the day the city fell, Julian was supposedly on his way to the convent to find me when he was struck by a stray arrow, blinding him in one eye. The arrow came from Cole's unit because Julian was the most outstanding scion of the House of Thorn. Cole had to apologize. But before he left, Kira made sure to explain the history between Julian and me. So, in the end, this is how Cole apologized. "I heard that the Lord rescued Princess Rosalind that day and left Lady Eleanor with us. I thought the Lord was simply blind to beauty. Turns out you have an eye after all. It was my mistake. Forgive me, my lord." As for Rosalind, on the day Lord Shen, now His Majesty, ascended the throne, Lady Thorn had her confined to her room and forced to drink poison. But Rosalind had never been one to submit meekly. With a strength born of desperation, she broke free from the 2 strong servants holding her down and smashed the porcelain bowl over and over again on Lady Thorn's head. Lady Thorn died, but Rosalind escaped in the chaos. The House of Thorn had been hunting for her ever since. "Eleanor Vance! You have ruined me," she cried pitifully. "I have nothing left. My country is gone. My husband's family wants to kill me, and it is all because of you. What kind of sorceress are you? Why are the men I love? My husband so obsessed with you." Alaric stepped in front of me. "Eleanor is sincere and brave. She works for what she wants. You only know how to take what you want through your status as a princess." Rosalind froze, her eyes slowly turning to him. It was as if she only now recognized the young man beside me. "Alaric," Alaric said coldly. "It is I. It has been a long time, princess." Rosalind's mouth fell open. "You are still alive." Her gaze fell on the official boots he was wearing, and she understood. "So that is how it is? That is how it is." She started laughing. No wonder the dog emperor wanted to exonerate the Snow family. "You became his running dog. Alaric Snow. Your grandfather's noble name is shamed. You have become a traitor." Then she started sobbing, her body shaking. "Why, are you going to be with Eleanor Vance again? It took so much effort to get my father to agree to our marriage, and in the end, you are still with her. You've made me a joke." Two strong servants came and grabbed her, expertly stuffing a gag in her mouth. Julian, following behind them, glanced at her. Then his single eye turned to me. "Eleanor," I cut him off calmly. "It is not appropriate for you to call me that, my lord. Please call me Lady Eleanor or Dean Vance." The Azure Academy was still under construction, but I had already been appointed its dean by the emperor. So, more people called me Dean Vance now. Julian wanted to say more but reached up to touch his eye patch, his voice full of sorrow. "Yes, I just wanted to apologize to Dean Vance for startling you." I nodded. "You are too kind, my lord." The person beside me suddenly hooked my little finger. I looked down at our hands, but the young man deliberately looked away into the distance. "Kira is waiting for us to eat wontons." I couldn't help but smile, intertwining my fingers with his. "Let's go." On the day of his ascension, the emperor had already held a banquet in the Heavenly Origin Hall to celebrate the founding of the new dynasty. But the celebration we were attending today was the real victory feast. It was still in a small courtyard with no formal servers. Everyone was boisterously passing dishes, clinking cups, and even putting their feet up on the benches to play drinking games. The emperor and empress, now I should call them Lord Shen and Sister Audra, were also in plain clothes, their arms around their comrades' shoulders. Kira sat next to me, whispering her recent troubles in my ear. It turned out she was being pursued by the son of the Minister of Rights. I just gave him a hand. Who knew he'd be so annoying? He keeps saying he has to repay a life-saving grace with his body. He follows me around all day. It is so annoying. I held back a laugh. Then just beat him up so he won't bother you anymore. I can't do that. Kira's eyes widened. He is so weak. What if I hurt him? Oh, so you can't bear to? Kira turned away. Who can't bear to? I am just being compassionate. I smiled and placed a piece of vegetable on her plate. Actually, the Minister of Rights' son is a man of virtue and talent, with a gentle temperament. If you like him, you might want to spend more time with him. Who likes? How do you know so much about him? Are you close? I rested my chin on my hand. Let me ask you. What is the young man's surname? Kira said. His surname is Vance. There you have it. I am, in fact, this young Mr. Vance's cousin. Kira's eyes widened, and she grabbed my arm. Then between me and your cousin, who do you like more? I couldn't help but laugh. You, of course. After a few rounds of drinks, Cole came over with a cup of wine, a little drunk. I stood up with my cup and teased him before he could speak. Brother Cole, are you here to drink with me today, or to scold me again? Bringing up the old matter made Cole's already red face turn even redder. Sister Eleanor, you are just teasing me. It was my fault that day. I'll drink 3 more cups to apologize. After he downed the 3 cups, we clinked our cups together. With the new dynasty established, Cole still held a military post. I said, may your military career be prosperous, Brother Cole. Cole's eyes twinkled. May Dean Eleanor's students be plentiful, and may my little brother here get his heart's desire. I followed his gaze. Alaric was looking at me quietly, the warm yellow light illuminating his handsome features. Our eyes met, and he suddenly smiled and held out his hand to me. I met this person at 7, knew him at 11, and fell in love with him at 12. At 13, he was exiled. At 16, I was forced to marry another. Eleanor, will you marry me? The banquet was noisy, but in that moment it was as if only our two heartbeats existed in the world. I slowly opened my mouth. Yes, since we parted, I've dreamt of our reunion. How many times in slumber has my soul been with you? End of main story epilogue. Alaric fell ill for the first time on the road to exile. A celebrated young man of noble birth, he had fallen from grace to become a prisoner. His respected grandfather had died in protest. His father and brother had been executed, and his mother, unable to bear the humiliation of being sent to a brothel, had hanged herself and her young daughter. On the day of his exile, it was cold and desolate. None of his former friends dared to see him off. Overnight, he had lost his home, his family, and his friends. Alaric collapsed on the road to the north. The guard's whip left bloody welts on his back, but he didn't move. Just as the guard was about to report him dead and bury him on the spot, a pair of strong arms lifted him. A man's voice was low but powerful. "Young sir, if you die, you lose everything. If you die, you lose everything." Those few words startled him back to his senses. He desperately swallowed the rice soup the man fed him and forced his eyes open. The man said his name was Shen. Alaric called him Brother Shen. When no one was around, Brother Shen told him that someone had come looking for him. It was a male servant who claimed to have been sent by his lady to bring him clothes and food. But before he could finish, he was dragged away by 2 other servants. Alaric clutched his sleeve. First, he laughed. Then, as he laughed, his eyes reddened. So there was still someone in this world who cared for him. At least, there was still someone. Even if it was just for her, he had to live. When he reached the north, Alaric learned what a living hell was. The exiles were skeletal, yet they still had to work in the snow and wind, never having enough to eat or wear. The slightest slackening was met with the guards' whips. This went on for 2 years, with no improvement, only getting worse due to the corrupt officials. Until a young man in his cell was beaten to death for talking back, Brother Shen stood up. Are kings and nobles born to their station? With those few words, the exiles in the north rose up. The world had long suffered under the tyranny of the Zhao dynasty. They marched south and more people joined them. Some prefectural governors, seeing that the dynasty was completely rotten, even opened their city gates to welcome the rebel army. When they took the 3rd city, he received news. Eleanor Vance was getting married. Alaric was stunned for a long time, but he felt no resentment. She was his pillar of strength. But she was also the wonderful Eleanor Vance, sincere, brave, and intelligent. It was only natural that many would love her. Alaric had only one thought left. He wanted to see her in her wedding gown. Ignoring the pleas of his comrades, Alaric slipped into the capital alone. He disguised himself as a hunched old man with a burned face, enduring the disgusted looks of others, trying to squeeze into the center of the crowd just to get a little closer to her. Alaric got his wish. She was wearing her wedding gown, her hair like a cloud, holding a round fan as she was helped down from the carriage. Her gaze seemed to sweep in his direction. Eleanor didn't linger, but soon, a maid came out and stopped beside him. The Thorne estate had prepared wedding favors for the onlookers. The one the maid gave him contained not only sweets but also a few silver pieces. "Old man, Our Lady wishes you good health." Alaric clutched the heavy pouch, his hands trembling slightly. The woman he loved was still that bright, clear moon. But he was no longer worthy of her. He saw Eleanor again in Yong City. Sister Audra had asked him to identify whether the captive was Princess Rosalind. Alaric asked, "If it is not Rosalind, who else could it be?" Sister Audra replied, "She claims to be the wife of the commander Julian Thorne." Alaric shot to his feet. Julian Thorne's wife. He had never run so fast. It was as if the wind was at his feet, yet he still felt he was too slow. But when he reached the door, he was suddenly filled with a nervous apprehension. Then, he heard a woman's voice from inside that haunted his dreams. "Young General." Alaric threw open the door. Their eyes met. After 6 years, he was finally reunited with her. From Eleanor, he learned what she had been through. That her marriage to Julian had been decreed by the Emperor. That Julian had won her trust only to abandon her for Rosalind when they were both captured. Alaric couldn't bear to think what would have happened to Eleanor if he hadn't been there. "Alaric, I am so happy to see you again." Her words smoothed away all his anxiety and anger. He had so much he wanted to say, but in the end, he could only restrain himself and reply, "As am I." Eleanor quickly adapted to life in Yong City. Many times, as he rushed by, he would see her surrounded by a group of people, calm and composed, her brush flying across the paper. Gradually, when they spoke of her, it was no longer "that beloved of yours." It was Lady Eleanor, or Sister Eleanor. Alaric was proud. How could the woman he loved be anyone's appendage? This thought was confirmed again on their wedding day. That was another 2 years later. In the intervening time, Julian had captured her and taken her back to the capital, and he had followed with Lord Shen's army to find her again. By then, she was free. On the day of the victory feast, he gathered his courage and proposed to her. Eleanor accepted. He was ecstatic, wanting to set the wedding for the very next day, but was strictly forbidden by Cole, Leo, and the others. Even Kira and Sister Audra were against it. They said they had to prepare a grand wedding. Eleanor should not be wronged in the slightest. How grand was it? Alaric suspected the entire city had come out to see her off. It turned out that after peace was restored, the abbess of the Great Compassion Convent had made known a good deed. During the last winter of the old dynasty, when food was scarce and people were starving on the streets, it was Dean Eleanor who had personally gone to the homes of the wealthy to solicit donations, collecting a full 70 stones of rice, which was cooked into porridge and distributed to the hungry in the name of the convent. This had prevented a widespread famine and allowed most people to survive until the army arrived. The people she had helped were grateful and spontaneously lined the streets to see her off on her wedding day. Eleanor was wearing her wedding gown but did not cover her face with a fan. Instead, she lifted the curtains and nodded to the people on both sides of the street. Her female students followed behind the carriage, their heads held high. Kira was at the front, and the last one was probably only 9 years old. They were of different ages, but the pride on their faces was the same. After the ceremony, her young cousin wiped his red eyes and threatened him fiercely. "If you dare to treat my cousin poorly, I will not let you off." Kira crossed her arms, full of righteous bravado. "You don't have to. Are we students useless?" Alaric gave a bitter smile. "Kira, I remember 2 years ago you said I was the most important person to you." Kira said matter of factly, "But the dean is not only my teacher, she is also my beloved." Her young cousin's expression changed several times. Shedding his fierce demeanor, he urged, "The hour is getting late. You should go to the bridal chamber." He pushed him through the door. Eleanor was sitting quietly on the bed, waiting. She found the headdress cumbersome and had already taken it off. She was wearing a white nightgown, her waterfall of long hair cascading over her shoulders, revealing a beautiful, unadorned face. Alaric suddenly became nervous, his throat dry. "Eleanor." Eleanor looked at him and smiled. The moon in the sky, the person in his heart. He had finally touched the moon.